all of these things, all of a sudden we're just exposed, like in a new way. And we find everyone, no matter who they are, because even if you're not in charge of little people at home or any age people at home, you maybe have a cat there.
Yeah.
Or you maybe have your roommate who's coming in hungover, or you maybe have, you know, all the things that are suddenly like very intimate, which has just reminded all of us and made some of us for the very first time come face to face with the fact that, as Audre Lorde says, there are no single issue struggles because we do not live single issue lives.
Hi, this is Frank Schaeffer, and you are watching In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer on Facebook Live, on YouTube, or listening to it as a podcast, or seeing it on some other interweb outlet. And today, I'm really pleased because I'm with someone who I really admire and whose thinking and speaking, when I last saw her in New York at an event fairly recently, opened a lot of doors for me. And I invited her to this, and I'm hoping to do some projects with her in the future. And that's Amanda. And Amanda, first of all, I can pronounce your name because it's the same as my granddaughter, Amanda. And secondly, I just checked on how to pronounce your last name, which is Ashcraft.
That's right.
So Amanda Ashcraft, you are an ordained minister. You serve at the Middle Collegiate Church in New York City with my friend Jackie. You're also the founder of Rising Imagination, a new voice for socially conscious kids and communities. And I think, you know, I'm throwing parents in there too, because of all our discussions we've had. I'd like to talk to you today about a number of things, personal and your views on issues of the day and so forth. But I want to start where I left off with talking with you in New York. You were giving a talk, and it was really interesting about being a parent at home with young kids, who, by the way, are how old now?
Let's see, now they are 7, 7, and 5. Okay,
7, 7, and 5. And you were relating your COVID year experience, and you had a really great phrase. And then I'm going to get to my question in a minute, but I just want to hear it from you about how you would tell people finally the truth about how busy you were. You would say something.
Due to the demands of, I will not be doing that because of pandemic parenting.
Due to the demands of, and then would you put your kids' names or just children?
I think I just generally said due to the demands of pandemic parenting.
Yeah, I love that. See, there's a title right there. If you're going to write a book sometime, just call it Due to the Demands of Pandemic Parenting. Yep. I will be your first customer. But it brought up a really larger subject, which I actually deal with in a new book of mine. You know, when I do these interviews with people, first of all, I do not pitch my new book all the time. I don't bring it up. But in your case, it's impossible not to, because I've spent 5 years working on this book called Fall in Love, Have Children, Stay Put, Save the Planet, Be Happy. And the crazy thing is, when I heard you talking, it's as if you walked out of the pages, because as a parent of young children, fitting together a very high-powered and busy career in a big city, stuck in an apartment in the COVID pandemic, it's as if you were sort of my little canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
And so when you talked about, say it again, due to the
demands of pandemic parenting, I will not be doing that.
That's it. And I wanted to fill in the blank and have due to the demands of, and fill in all sorts of stuff.
Absolutely.
Parenting, you know, good parenting, hands-on parenting. I will not be doing that. But I want to read something to you from my book, which I have here, because it's very apropos of what you're talking about. And then I want you to talk, and I'm going to shut up and let you tell us what you think about this and a lot of other things.
Okay.
As my daughter, Jessica, who is the CEO of a green energy investment company in New York City, put it, quote, businesses were established by men. They pretended they had no families. Families and women stayed home when women joined the workforce. The deal was we pretended we didn't have a family either and played by men's rules. Then came COVID, and business meetings were on Zoom. Everyone was working from home. Family life was out in the open. Babies ran through online meetings. Toilets flushed in the background. I was meeting with the president of a bank on Zoom yesterday, and he whispered, I have to talk quietly or I'll wake the baby. She just went down for a nap. End quote. Not only were families suddenly visible, people seemed to be getting used to the fact they didn't have to hide them and could even admit they had kids. Suddenly, the worlds of work and home mixed. Everyone is rethinking their priorities and how they balance work and life. Dad. So I read that quote to someone who had read an early draft of this book, who happens to be, and I'm going to read something from her, lawyer and activist Christine Derrico, and she's also a judge, by the way, in Connecticut, busy lady, describes women who feel pressured to keep family life hidden in order to be taken seriously at work. In an email to me, she wrote, quote, "This issue was brought to my attention at a Women in Innovation event held in Rye, New York Art Center several years ago. During a panel discussion featuring several prominent women leaders, the point was made that as women, we need to, quote, stop lying about where you are, end quote. I was interested to learn that other women also sometimes feel they need to lie when our location relates to family and children, whether it's a doctor's appointment or maybe a school event. When I'm on a professional call, I find myself not wanting to admit where I am. For instance, I say I'm at the office, not doing a school pickup. I wouldn't say that I've completely stopped doing this, but these days after COVID, I'm much more forthright about my actual life and priorities. And so, you know, you were talking about the fact that due to the pandemic, I'm doing this, not even pretending anymore. Okay, that opens a huge can of worms that I talk about in my book. It'll be out November 2nd. But
my birthday,
your birthday,
really soulmates.
Is that serious? Are you serious? Oh, that's great. I'll have to put that in the second edition. And this also happens to be Saint Amanda's birthday.
There you go.
Okay, so anyway, Amanda, that's got to ring some bells with you, because that's right where you live and work, and you're in a very, rush city. So my question to you is, have you ever reflected on these sorts of experiences? What do you think about it? Are you a parent who also at times has been tempted to try to appear professional, because this is for men and women, by de-emphasizing all your personal ties and relationships in favor of looking professional in the workplace?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. That's the short and the long answer as you were reading that. And I've actually gotten to read some of that in a draft of yours as well. And I thought of that same paragraph when I was reading it. I was thinking, is this my life? Is this me right here?
Yeah.
I first have to say that due to the demands of was actually a phrase my sister used. And so we've coined that together. So I have to give my sister, Dr. Erin Hambrick, credit for that. Yeah. So due to the demands of pandemic parenting is absolutely become real. Yeah. And I think, to your question, have I felt any of those things? Yes. I mean, I'm thinking of a time that I interviewed for a job, 17 weeks pregnant, and I wore Spanx because I didn't want anybody to know that I was pregnant. So any, little bit of bump that was there, I wanted to hide. And, these things are absolutely real. They're absolutely more true for women, people who identify as women in the workplace, or anyone who is pregnant, because of the way that our bodies are actually part of the process. And there's so many ways that then we can't hide, but yet we have to hide. And there's so many ways that just by being pregnant puts us in this being seen without even having a thought or a voice in, am I ready to be seen? Am I ready to talk about it? Space is a reality that only people who are pregnant deal with. And it absolutely happens so much more in the workplace. Frank, I'm thinking of another time that I was applying for a job. And this was a church in Brooklyn, New York. So, you would think that it is in New York, we're more progressive there. It was a white, straight male senior pastor at the time, but I did not get the job because he leaked to another colleague that he didn't think that with 3 young children at home, I could do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's amazing.
And that came back to me. And so my colleague called and said, you got to run, you got to get far out of here. And so of course, as soon as I did hear that, I was like, of course, that's not a place that I would want to be anyway, because if someone sees parenting as a deficit, then they are the ones who needs to do a lot of work. And that tells you so much already about the culture of the workplace and of what the values are there. That I was so grateful for that colleague for letting me know that that was in the space. On the contrary, I have a boss now like Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis at Middle Church, who you mentioned, who will say to this day that one of the main reasons that she hired me was because she saw me on the mall in Washington, D.C., pushing a double stroller with 3-year-old twins and carrying with a baby carrier a 1-year-old at a Poor People's Campaign protest with my, clerical attire. And she thought to herself, okay, that's the type of person that can get shit done.
Yeah.
Like they understand that life is not compartmentalized and that we are our best selves when we can be real and true and say, this is who I am. These are the things that I prioritize. This is what I'm bringing to the space. And let's see what we can do from there. I'm not always good at that, even though I have, a boss like Jackie who does that. And I do work in a very progressive and wonderful space now. America's society is, and the patriarchy and capitalism, white supremacy are still so deeply entrenched with our American culture that I am still fighting that every day. And I'll give you an example of even just during the pandemic. I didn't even mention at that event, Frank, that I actually had a miscarriage during the pandemic as well. So on top of everything happening, the pandemic flipping everything on its head, still doing that on top of working out of a 945 square foot apartment with 3 small kids, I had a miscarriage. And I actually, because being pregnant is such a bodily experience, I hadn't told anybody at work yet that I was even pregnant because, it's early and that's a weird thing. And talking about being pregnant at work is still taboo. Because what are people going to think? Are they going to think you're leaving? Are they going to think you can't do it anymore? Are they going to get nervous? So I actually continued taking meetings while I was actively bleeding because I didn't want to even say at that point, and now I'm having a miscarriage. Yeah. And I did that. And I worked myself so hard that I ended up, I guess, 4 days after the initial miscarriage, having an emergency D&C, because I couldn't stop bleeding. And all that to say, that's the work that still we as a society have to do to help pregnant people, to help mothers, to help women feel like they can be honest about the fullness of their life. Because otherwise, this task of mothering, which I love how in your book you call a task of nurture and care to anyone, no matter their biology, no matter their gender. But this task of mothering has to be understood as a collective call. It has to be understood as something that we as a society not only have to see as a collective call, but have to begin to value. Yeah.
Now, as you know, in the book, and like I say, I do not use these interviews to promote the book, but the fact that it's being released on your birthday makes it utterly ridiculous. Yeah. But here we are. Fall in love, have children, stay put, save the planet, be happy. One of the points I make is that we all have children, in that raising a child is a societal obligation. It really does take a village, which is why there are fathers and cousins and grandparents and childcare people and teachers and all the rest of us. Single, attached, gay, non-binary is not the point. Biological motherhood is not the point. The point is, are we nurturers? And I've experienced this for the last 12 years very intensely, being the primary caregiver for my 3 youngest grandchildren, who are now 12, 10, and 7. And they've been in my care, not in my wife's care with me helping a little, in my care with her. But we've done this together, and I've changed my life around to do this, to be their childcare givers. And I, of course, have found the most pleasure, as I express in the book, in this activity of anything I've ever done. And so I'm looking back at my male experience with my own children when I was away more and not as attentive, and saying, wow, I'm glad those grown children are my friends, but I blew it because I didn't know then what I know now. And that is that what I'm doing now as a caregiver is so much more rewarding than simply putting all the emphasis on kind of shareholder profit career type orientation. So to go back to my daughter for a minute, because she brings up an interesting point later in the book, and I won't read it, but she added something to that first quote later and said, "Oh, Dad, I don't know if you want to use this," because I'd asked her if I could use the first email. But she said, it's even worse than that. And I think you'll resonate with this as someone who was having a miscarriage in a progressive situation where if there's anywhere you would feel you could get, but you still didn't want to share that right then. She was saying, people ask me how at my age, I am, quote, already the CEO of a company. Well, she's 50, but young for what this is. And she said, sometimes I say to them, well, my college did not prepare me and work experiences prepare me, but what really prepared me to run an investment company is what I learned as a parent. And that my raising 2 children and being a parent and juggling all of that and making it all work is actually the experience that on a day-to-day basis contributes more. And she says 2 things happen, both with males and females: embarrassed silence, or they change the subject, because that apparently is not something you're supposed to include as a professional qualification. I've been a parent or a mom or a dad or a caregiver for X number of years. And I just think that really hammers it home. Yeah. And the second point is that a lot of men that I quote in this book, even given paternity leave, which is rare in America, still don't take it because even men think if I take paternity leave, it'll count against me somehow. I won't be seen as serious. So I just want to throw those things out and hear your response.
Let me start with the second one, because that's what I'm sitting with right now. And we know also that we're not going to be able to shift this until males actually do show that they understand that caregiving is equally their role. My husband was working at Etsy when we had my 3rd daughter, and they actually have a very progressive family leave policy. He actually got 4 months off as when our daughter was born. And I had, I was scrambling for, 10, 11, whatever I could make. Actually went back after 7 so that I could do some part-time things. He was bringing me my daughter so I could nurse, the whole 9 yards. But he wrote a piece it was called 4 Months of Dad, and was saying how until men can show that this is their job and that they actually have to be the risk takers and put themselves out there to say, we understand that there is risk involved. And why is there risk involved? Because we've created a society that statistically shows that women are behind in the workplace because of the time that they take off to do the caregiving. So until we can shift all of those balances and show that, we get that right now there is actually an economic impact for taking time off to care and to raise kids. We're not okay with that, but that is true right now. And it is going to take the job of all of us. And so it takes the job of, we need employers and we need CEOs and we need everyone who is in any position in a company to be able to say, we have to be able to give time and take time and affirm and value time for whichever caregiver is needing to take it, for as long as they want to take it until these shifts can begin to happen. And then first to your daughter, Amanda's thoughts about how actually being a mother has prepared her more than anything else to be a CEO. 1000% agree. I think it's Nancy Pelosi who said that being a mom of 5 herself is what prepared her to be Nancy Pelosi and to be able to get the job done. And there's so many skills and things that I have learned at home by being a parent that apply to my job outside the home, which I think is a really important way that we should talk about work. I think we should talk about work inside the home and work outside the home. Because there's also this debate out there about who's a working mom, who's a working parent. We're all working. Damn it. It's just like, where are we doing it? Is it in the home? Is it outside the home? Is it, so that's a side note. But where am I going with this? I'm thinking about just the way that as a parent, especially of young children, and I'm sure you can resonate, we have to think about time and how we use our time, right? And we actually have to be pretty intentional about it. If I need to write something, if I know that I'm preaching a sermon, if I know that I have an article due, I absolutely have to know what 2 hours of the day I'm going to use them. And when is that exactly going to be? Because it's not going to be when all the kids are awake and they're going to be hungry and they're going to be wanting books. They're going to want to do this. It's not going to be when somebody needs to nurse. It's not going to be when I know somebody's going to have to go to here or there. And so I'm very intentional about my time. I'm very disciplined about it. And also this idea, say a little bit more when she was speaking about something about questioning, you said, or silence, or
we're talking about my daughter.
Yeah.
And by the way, my granddaughter's name is Amanda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Jessica. No, hey, yesterday I mispronounced and got the name wrong of the person I was interviewing 3 times till she corrected me.
Okay.
So, you're talking, the fact that you're even in the ballpark with one of them is like 10 times better than anything I ever manage.
Well, thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, I mean, I told my producer, Ernie, to please put your name in the chat section again so that I don't screw up like I did yesterday.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's just put it all on the table.
I'm going to do it right now, team. Look, I'm going to help him out.
Yeah, that's it. No, I already put that there. So anyway, Jessica is someone who actually did it all backward. I'm going to give you a little bit of her history, and I talk about it in the book. She dropped out of NYU.
Okay.
Got married to a Finnish pianist, composer, moved to Scandinavia, had 2 kids where she raised them there, went back and finished her education at the University of Finland. Was free, by the way, because they have actual social programs there. Stayed home with her kids until the youngest was just about to go into school, then got hired by a company where she had been an intern, blah, 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 built her way up. Now she's back in New York City, and she's the CEO of an investment company that invests in green energy projects. But the thing that was interesting about her is that she happened to do that. She didn't sort of choose that path. That's how it all worked out. But the result was that by the time she became incredibly beholden to a rather high-powered career, her kids were school age.
Okay.
And so she broke all those rules, and she says how wistful a lot of the younger women she works with are, because they've never even thought that something like that is possible. They're told, you go to college, you don't even have a boyfriend these days because that's too serious. That might tie you down. Then you move through that period. Hey, you probably need a master's degree to get anywhere. And if you're on a certain track, maybe a PhD too. Once you've got your career established, maybe you can have a serious relationship. I'm being a little facetious, but not much. And then, but you got to really get things going before you could possibly even think about a child. And suddenly, your relationships are in jeopardy because work has consumed you. The only person you're serving is the corporate interests of the shareholder.
Yeah.
Biology doesn't even count. I mean, where your fertility thing is, we're not even talking about that, let alone, a relationship. And then by the time you're where she's at, you're not even supposed to mention that you have a family and that you're trying to do this. And then if you say, hey, I learned something from having this family and children, everybody sort of looks at their feet, doesn't quite know what to say, because that's not how it shows up. But I think that our universities, this is my point I'm trying to get into, are also culpable because they pitch young people with this sort of a self-serving one path through our institution. And if you veer from it, you're not serious. And that goes for men and women. And I think it hurts even being able to establish a relationship, let alone have children. I don't know how you think about that cycle.
Yeah, it's absolutely there. It's absolutely there. The pressure is absolutely there. And where I find myself ruminating most is, so really, what would it take to shift that, to change that? And I think, your book is so timely also because it's coming out right at the end of at least a part of the pandemic and
your birthday.
And my birthday, where, as we note, all of these things, all of a sudden we're just exposed, like in a new way. And we find everyone, no matter who they are, because even if you're not in charge of little people at home or any age people at home, you maybe have a cat there.
Yeah.
Or you maybe have your roommate who's coming in hungover, or you maybe have, all the things that are suddenly like very intimate, which has just reminded all of us and shown us, a lot of us, let me say that better, made some of us for the very first time come face to face with the fact that, as Audre Lorde says, there are no single issue struggles because we do not live single issue lives.
Yeah.
And I think about that quote all the time when I think about how I bring my full self to anything that I do. Because we are always all struggling in beautiful ways, but towards this goal of collective liberation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we are doing that, then there's none of those struggles. There's none of that journey. There's none of that walk that is only one thing.
Mm.
I'm never just Amanda, the entrepreneur. I'm never just Amanda, the minister. I'm always Amanda, the mother, the partner, the minister, the creative, the daughter, the friend. I'm always those things. And the fullness of who I am is actually what makes, in my opinion, all of us be able to do whatever it is that we're doing at any given moment, all the much better.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Frank Schaeffer. This is In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer. This is Amanda that I'm talking to today. And she does a lot of things. She's a pastor. She is a parent. She's at Congregational Life Middle Church in New York City. And she's also the founder. You're the founder
of Raising Imagination.
Raising Imagination. And which I probably called Rising Imagination before. Yeah, okay. So see, I did screw it up.
I was thinking about it. I was like, it has similar images.
Yeah. So anyway, many things. You know, coincidentally, just before I was getting ready to do this, I was watching a YouTube video of you on Fox News coming up to the election, but in preparation for this. But also it so happened that I saw a breaking news story, listened to a breaking news story from the BBC Radio 4 out of the UK that I listen to every day, good news station. Google has just announced that they are going to penalize and lower the pay of workers who stay home to work now that they want to have come back to the office.
Interesting. Google,
wow. this high-powered, forward-thinking, you get free sushi and skateboards in the hallway.
What's the reason?
They want people back in the office so that the corporate, the steel corporate fist, off comes the velvet glove, and Google announced that they are considering, they didn't say they would do it, I guess they're tentatively, that they want more people back in the office, but a lot of their employees want to keep working from home. And it's been very efficient. It's worked very well for people. And, Goldman Sachs did the same thing. Their CEO said this was an aberration, people wanting to stay working from home. I'm thinking of all the workers of Goldman's and Google and these huge corporations, these trillion-dollar corporations, who discovered something new about themselves and were forced to during the pandemic. Suddenly here's the VP of a high-powered company, and he's home taking care of toddlers. He's actually discovering that maybe he doesn't hate this, and that now he is forced to do what maybe his partner or wife has been asking him to do for years, and he wouldn't do. Now he's doing it. He wants to actually keep a piece of this life. But Goldman's and Google want him back, and they say, we're going to cut your pay if you don't show up. I mean, that's happening right now while we're talking about this book, Fall in Love, Have Children, Stay Put, Save the Planet, Be Happy. You and me are discussing this. And right now, Google is telling their employees, if we tell you to come back to the office and you don't, we're cutting your pay.
And do you know why I think they're doing that? I'm sure you have thoughts too. I think they're doing it because they're scared. I think they are acting out of a mindset and a theology of scarcity rather than abundance. And I think they are afraid of losing power and control. Because they think there is this, old kind of mantra out there that if your butt's not in a certain seat for 9 to 5 or heck 8 to 7, then you're actually not being as efficient. When actually studies show the absolute opposite. Forget the capital involved, that it actually saves money to have people working from home. But studies also show that when people are in charge of their own schedules and they have some flexibility in there, they are more efficient at work, and they are happier at work, which means that their outcomes are greater. And so in my mind, the only reason that companies would be doing this is because they're scared. They're scared of what? They're scared of people leaving. They're scared of people leaving. They're scared of not having the control of them in a certain way. They're scared of change. They're scared of recognizing that this may be the new way that we have to be able to do life.
Yeah.
And it wasn't my idea. So maybe I don't want to be quite open to it yet.
Yeah.
And yet we all saw one of the first videos that went viral of the man who was on TV and the kid, you know, runs in the back.
Sure.
That one was just hilarious. And then I did mention to you at our talk too, that something that resonated with me so deeply that I saw on Twitter during the pandemic was a tweet by a working parent who said that when a child interrupts a Zoom of a parent at home, instead of the parent apologizing, like we all have done, oh, I'm so sorry, can you get out? Like we're acting like the kid come in, like we're all doing that. Everybody else in the meeting should apologize.
Yeah, I love that when you said that.
Isn't that so great? And that is so powerful to me because we should be apologizing for the fact that we have created a system that thinks that we have to hide.
Yes.
For the fact that we've created a world where, isn't it beautiful to hear the footsteps of a child?
Yeah.
Isn't it so nice that we can recognize that this is how we all at some level were nurtured and cared for?
Yeah.
And that there was somebody who was taking the time to do that.
Yes.
And I can't even tell these stories without, pointing out, believe it or not, this is not my fancy background. We are actually spending a couple of weeks at my parents' house working remotely. So I'm in a small town in Kentucky, and my mom has 5 grandkids right now.
That's great.
That's what she's doing. She's hanging out with the grandkids so that we can do this.
Yes. And by the way, if they all come crashing through the door, they are welcome here. Neither of us has to apologize. It'll be lovely.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. But it's those stories that I've been more, and I'll stop talking about it. It's those stories that I have, because of the pandemic myself, become more open to share and to say. And I tell you that I had a colleague, Natalie, who heard me tell that story about Twitter, and we were in a meeting. And my little girl came into a meeting once, and I started, getting nervous, and she looked at the meeting and she said, "I am sorry." Yeah. And she actually did that. And I started crying, and I start crying when I tell it again, because it was somebody who saw me in that moment. Yeah. And who saw with me and with us the mistakes that we have put in place in our capitalistic society for the things that we don't value. And it was just really beautiful and humbling and encouraging. Yeah.
Just before you and I started this talk, I was talking with my producer, Ernie Gregg, who does a tremendous job setting all these up and tracking with all the guests and doing many, many other things to help me promote Fall in Love, Have Children, Stay Put, Save the Planet, Be Happy. And Ernie and his husband, Rock, who, by the way, is a pastor. My producer is married to a pastor. So Ernie and Rock are a couple. And they have a cycle of taking in foreign exchange students and helping them from various countries. I think they've had somebody from Switzerland and Italy, and now they have someone coming from another country, having problems putting them in school and so forth. And one of the things that I really like about my relationship with Ernie is that even though we were discussing this, like, is that what we all set up with Amanda, and please put her title here in the thing because I'm going to screw it up, my usual stuff. When I asked Ernie how he was, instead of just saying, "Oh, fine," he's having trouble finding a school because of COVID where he can place this high school student that will take him now because of all the crazy stuff of coming from abroad. And we talked about that just as intensely. In other words, the child in his life that he's helping right now. And there wasn't any kind of separation there. And it makes me think, as a man, there is a barrier, when you work with other men have a thing about being very self-sufficient and all this sort of bullshit. And none of us really are, but we keep up a front. One of the things that helped me being a caretaker of these grandchildren is that I didn't even have to pretend anymore not to be someone who loves to cook for kids, do things with them, gets tired because I'm taking care of them all day. That side of my life, is impossible to hide and was before COVID. So I find myself getting up very early in the morning to write, 3:30, 4 a.m., or I wouldn't be writing a book because later, I'm taking care of these kids and so forth. It used to be that you're trying to appear professional. I'm an author, I'm blah, blah, blah. Even this feeling that if you have to fit everything together, somehow you're less successful. My point being that I don't think it's just that women have had to hide a side of their life that somehow isn't on the university, college degree, master's degree, PhD, career thing. This whole other side is subsumed by our culture because, and this is the point I'm coming to, and I want you to now talk about this. I think that it all starts because American culture has an entirely wrong idea of how you define the word success. And to me, success is not about your job. It's who you are, not what you do. And that sounds very easy to say, but I want you to riff on that. Who you are, not what you do. How do we get from where we are now to the place where we really care about who someone is, not what they do? How do you see that? How do we change that from male, female, non-binary, gay, straight? How do we really change it so we don't give a shit what your job title is? Yep. What we care about is who you are, what matters to you for real. How do we do that?
These are the questions that keep us up at night, right? I'm reading a book right now called We Do This Till We Free Us. It's by an abolitionist activist named Miriam Kaba. And she says something in there about how every time, she poses something, specifically for her, it's usually we need to abolish prisons or we need to defund police. And someone will say, but how can we be safe? How can we do that if we don't fill in the blank? And she says her response is always, we'll figure it out together. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now when you are posing these really right and difficult questions. Yeah. Because whereas they are poignant questions, they're actually huge, right? They're huge because they're entrenched. Success is defined very narrowly in our American white male straight culture. Christian, let's put Christian in there, right? We haven't even really talked about the role of faith in this yet. And we have a lot of work to untangle that and to unwind that. So there's not going to be an easy answer or even one answer, but asking it and saying, this is the dream. This is the goal. And that's where, my kind of raising imagination platform comes in. Like, we have to be able to continually put into the universe that which we want to bring about. We have to continually say, like, this is what we imagine for the world. So let's stay accountable to that. Let's say that this is it and that's real. I think it was Obama who said that the best organizers are the ones who tell the best stories about who we want to be, about the future. That's how we're going to organize, by continually saying, this is how we want to do it. I also think that Black queer radicals have a lot to teach us in this space. They have this understanding of the collective and of how we have to do this work from a community mindset rather than an individual mindset, much more than people like you and I look like do. They have had to do this because their very lives have depended on it. There's a book that I want to bring into the space, actually two books. One of them is called We Live for the We, The Political Power of Black Motherhood. And it's by someone by the name of Danny McCain. And she says that she tells her daughter, a mantra that she tells her daughter all the time, is that we don't live for the I, we live for the we. And I think to myself, if I were told that as a young child, as a young white girl growing up in small town Kentucky, we live for the we, how would that change how I define success? How would that change how I think about how I want to spend my time, my money, the type of job I want to have? And another book that I'd like to put in the space is a one called Revolutionary Mothering, Love on the Front Lines. It's edited by Black queer radicals, Alexis Pauline Gumbs, China Martins, and Mia Williams. And they actually speak directly to a question that we talked about earlier, which is, how does parenting help make us successful to be the CEOs, to be the whatever it is that we are. And the premise of their book is actually that the challenges that we face as movements when we're working for racial or economic or reproductive, gender, food justice, whatever, are the same challenges that specifically oppressed mothers face every day. because oppressed mothers have to create this generous space for life in the face of life-threatening limits.
Yeah.
And they have to continually advocate for, this is the life I want for you, child, even though I'm always at odds. The odds for that life are stacked against us.
Yeah.
So I think we get there, Frank, by asking questions, by putting that vision out there together. I think we get there about being honest and vulnerable about where we are in any given moment, whether that be working from Kentucky. My office when I was in New York was the bathroom. I took most of my meetings from the toilet, closed, thankfully, but on top of the toilet, because we have a 2-bedroom apartment. And then if I had a real serious one, I'd tell my husband, okay, I got to be in there for this one, or you got to be in the, you got to be there in this one. But when we say that out loud, it really does help people think, wow, we don't really have a sustainable system right now.
Yes.
Because there's no safe place for these working parents to send their kids during a pandemic.
Yeah.
Because if there were, they'd probably send them there.
Yeah.
But we actually don't want to have any caregiver have to get there to take care of someone, nor if our jobs are on the line, do we have money to do that? And so all of a sudden we start to see, wow, somebody's really working from a toilet, or if somebody has really lost their job or can't apply for one because of being a parent and a caregiver, a grandparent, an auntie, then what have we done?
Yeah.
Like, what have we really done?
Yeah, it's really good point. I think one of the things we've done is the average American moves 11 times in their life and then wonders why they're feeling lonely and nobody's around that they know and nobody there to call. Plus, we segregate the generations. So we think it's normal that toddlers are being taken care of by 20-somethings, but your grandmother's in Florida and you've just moved the 13th time for a job. And how's all this working out for us?
Yeah.
When we, one of the things I have in my book is I say, this is not a matter of morality. It's a matter of what actually gives us joy in life, which is support from other people and caring for other people. We evolved as caregivers. We did not evolve as corporate citizens. Nobody would have survived the hunter-gatherer period if we hadn't shared with each other. Yeah. So that even if you've been betrayed by the people of your generation around you, the only reason any of us are here is because someone back there didn't drop the ball. That's why you and me made it.
Exactly.
Our ancestors did. Well, they didn't drop the ball, not by making, $1 billion and building their own space rocket. They didn't drop the ball by sharing and caring and nurturing.
Yep.
And so we evolved, whether it's oxytocin and why we feel love and all these other inducements to care for people, we evolved in a way where the only real rewards that people have, say an old guy like me pushing 70 or a younger mother or father or parent or whatever, eventually comes from this experience of sharing and caring, nurturing and love. If we're not on the receiving end or the giving end of that, we've really missed the whole thing. I mean, all of it, unless you're a sociopath and had real mental issues. You will have missed everything. So all the statistics that show loneliness and teen suicide and all this stuff, it all relates to exactly what you and I are talking about here, I think, which is that once you place success on money and power over others and job success, rather than sharing, nurturing, caring, being cared for from cradle to grave, it isn't that you've done a wrong thing from the point of view of the teachings of Jesus or Muhammad or whatever. You've done a stupid thing, if I can put it this way, because you have literally eaten the wrapper and thrown out the candy. That's the deal.
Yeah.
And that's the tragedy, because the corporate boss who wants you back at work and at your desk will not tell you this and will not do anything to help you. And nor, with the exception of some of Joe Biden's recent legislation, will our government that provides no social stuff. So, we always talk about pro-choice and the abortion issue and all this other stuff. I have a much deeper question. What about any choices? In other words, why don't we build a platform from which people have real choices to maybe interrupt education, have a baby, don't get that PhD yet, start work, leave work, take care of a child, come back, male or female, non-binary, doesn't matter.
Yep.
Where's that culture? So this is a discussion, I think, of truly revolutionary proportion.
Yeah.
And I would ask the question like this: are there any young parents out there who feel that they've been having to hide their parenthood in favor of job? Just that.
Oh, yeah.
I'll bet you that if you rephrase that in your own words now, we could get a big answer on that. I mean, Absolutely. How would you put that?
Exactly how you did. In fact, my friend Megan, who was in New York, but moved during the pandemic, also has 3 young kids to North Carolina to be closer to family and all that. She actually started a little movement. She did this campaign recently, which basically advocated for mothers putting mothering on their resume.
That's great.
And I can't remember, I can send it to you, but it's something basically called like raising humans or something. But like, why the hell don't we put that on our resume?
Yes.
Why are we acting like that is something that has taken us away from anything, rather than for 6 years, this is what I did.
Yeah.
For 5 years, this is what I did. And so there actually is this kind of awakening now that we really have to put raising humans on our resume, not acting like it's a gap, not acting like it's a whatever.
Yeah.
And so to the question too, like, how do we shift this? Of course, we ask the questions and we get there together and we keep imagining and we are accountable to that which we want. But there are some tangible things that we can do now, right? I mean, we can have public conversations like this. You know, you are, because you're an author and have been published in things, you know, you saying like, I'm shifting my mindset on this. You having a company and employees where you are saying, I care about you as a person. I care about your well-being. I recognize that our lives are not compartmental. Is shifting the narrative, is getting us there. We can advocate for just and equal policies for family leave in the workplace. We can demand that from our employers. I'm working on staff right now too with a young dad whose partner's about to have a baby, and you know, he's feeling some kind of way about asking for time off. Do I take it? I said, yeah, absolutely take it, Daryl. I said, because when you take it, that actually helps me.
Yes.
And it only helps me, but it helps everybody else who's coming after you.
Yeah.
And you don't take it. If you're not going to act like you're not deserve this, or you're better than it, or we can't do the job without you, then you're hurting every mother out there. You're actually only hurting us. And so there are very tangible things that we can do. We can also really make sure that when we talk about care and nurture, we think about all of the care and nurture jobs in our country. I'm a big fan of Ajin Poo, the director of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, and she's done a lot about care culture. She's got TED Talks about it. And, you know, this is kind of her thing too. And she reminds us constantly that care and nurture jobs, which are usually unpaid, are actually fundamental to enabling our economic activity.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's projected that by the year 2030, childcare and elder jobs will be our economy's single largest occupation, but we've never valued them in social or political discourse because women, usually women of color, are the ones that are doing the most of it. So I think if we can think about all the care and nurture jobs that are there too, because it's not just parenting, that's a huge one.
Absolutely.
But it is all of those care and nurture jobs that are undervalued, not seen. So why can't we raise? So when we're talking about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, we're talking about helping working parents.
When we're talking yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
That's it. I could preach that sermon.
No, I didn't want to cut you off. Had to read where you were. Sorry. I was talking to Felicia Davis the other day on this interview in conversation with Frank Schaeffer, and Felicia's the CEO of a wonderful outfit called in Chicago called the Chicago Women's Foundation. And she spent 10 years as a detective in the Chicago police force with the Serious Crimes Division. Okay. She was in Rahm Emanuel's office when he was mayor as very important figure in Chicago government. Anyway, she's running this foundation that helps women. And she was saying, when I talked to her about the question I talked with you about earlier, that it isn't just childcare. She says it's caring for anybody. So she says, hey, I have an old mom. She's not well right now. I tell people I'm going over there to take care of my mother right now. Yes, this is office hours, and I'm leaving work right now to go take care of her. That's part of who I am. Deal with it. Yeah. And I love the way she put it. So it isn't just childcare. It isn't just parenting.
Yep.
You know, it's an entire society which minimizes the care of others in favor of these big, important money earning, by the way, planet busting careers.
Yep.
Okay. And we don't even give Social Security payments to a parent who has stayed home with their children. We only pay if you paid into the system as a working parent, i.e. outside the home. Like, none of this business of raising children counts, or caring for an elderly parent. It's horrible.
Right.
And it's reflected in our tax system. It's reflected in the social security system, and so forth and so on. Let me just pause to say that I'm talking with Hambrick Ashcraft, who is a pastor, who is a mother, who is a partner and of someone else, raising a family, as well as somebody who works on these issues that I've spoken with, shared a platform with a little while back ago in New York. And we're talking about this in view of the fact that I have a book coming out on her birthday, November 2nd, Fall in Love, Have Children, Stay Put, Save the Planet, Be Happy, which actually I've taken 5 years to write in the light of being the primary caregiver of 3 of my 5 grandchildren, and so forth. So we've been talking a lot about caregiving, and we're noticing that it's a lot of people, a lot of Black American women and others who are doing the caregiving. It's underpaid, it's undervalued. But I don't just think it applies to women. I think men who stay home with their kids have got to put up with a lot of bullshit from their male cohort as somehow like, what are you doing this for?
Yeah. The patriarchy hurts all of us, right?
Yeah, exactly, including men. Exactly. And in my book, I talk about the fact that feminism's best result is the liberation it gives men who, if they were like me, raised in a religious environment that basically was oppressive to women, in that I was raised to believe men should be in charge of the house, disciplinarians of the family. Part of my own journey that I talk about is coming out of that. Mm-hmm. So, you know, my point of view is that I'm trying to do, and I'm asking you about mirroring in a wider culture, in a way, a journey I took. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You mean like, how am I mirroring your journey in this culture now?
Meaning that if my wife, Jeannie, had you for a pastor, 25 years ago, you're too young to have done that because, you know, you're a younger person. But if she would have been coming to you with horror stories about this asshole she's married to by the name of Frank Schaeffer, who was raised by fundamentalist Calvinist Christians, who told him God had called him to be a patriarch, head of the home, boss everybody, tell her what to do. And I had to take this long, convoluted journey to change the way I saw things because of her patience and toughness and all the rest of it. I got further down that path. But I come from, you know, you're looking at it, I'm the problem. People like me. Yeah. And I grew from that. But I don't think a lot of males realize that we've been saddled with horrible baggage that has brutalized us and taken us away from our primary call, which is to be caregivers. This isn't about motherhood. This is about caregiving. Yep. I know I rambled on a little bit and I got too personal there, but I just want a reaction from you.
No, I think that's right. I mean, we don't hear enough males talking about toxic masculinity, right? We don't hear enough males talking about how the patriarchy that is always paired really closely with whiteness and white supremacy. We don't hear them talking enough about
Christianity.
And Christianity, absolutely, about how those things are inseparable and actually most harmful to them. We know that in this country, the highest rate of people who die by suicide is white males.
Yeah.
And there is a problem here. Something is not working. Something is not working for white males, even though there is a facade that it is, because that we are powerful and we're in control and we're climbing this ladder, and we're not going to show our kids because we're, you know, the CEOs and we've got everything figured out, but something's not working. Yeah. They're not actually all happy. And so when we can begin to have these conversations, and when people like you and others can start speaking out and saying, this is also my truth, you know, my husband, Graham, who I've referenced a couple of times, he had just started a new job. And so of course the questions and the fears in my mind are like, okay, he's got to do well. He's got to perform well. Like, let's make sure he can like do this, whatever. And, you know, first month on the job, he emails his company and says, I'm leaving at 3:00 to take my kids trick-or-treating. And I was like, really, Graham, really? And he's like, yeah, I am. Yeah. I'm absolutely doing that because that's important to me, and I'm going to model that. And if I don't do that now, one, I'm being untrue to who I am. And two, I am not actually being true to the life that we want to create, to the society that we want to shift, which is actually one where that is okay. Yeah. Like that is okay.
Speaking of which, what's the name of your friend you talked about a moment ago who started this organization. You said what it was called, and I've already forgotten.
Yeah, her name is Megan, and I want to find you her last name, and I knew that I was going to lose it. So one second. Megan Harper.
Okay, so where does Megan Harper live?
Now, she lived in New York City for like 12 years, but then
okay, and what is this organization Charlotte. She started?
She moved to Charlotte. It is it was including motherhood on your resume.
Okay,
it's not a 501c3 yet, but her whole thing is, her whole movement is include motherhood on your resume.
Okay, so put me and my producer, the redoubtable Ernie,
yep, I will,
in touch with Megan, because I want to interview her about that and help promote that, because it's so much to do with what we're doing here today. Absolutely. And it would be a great follow-up. So let's talk to Megan, because I love that. You know, it isn't family. She's saying what? Put what on your resume? Say it again.
I can't remember if she said put motherhood or put raising humans on your resume.
I love that, raising humans.
I think it might be raising humans, but the whole gist is, and she kind of went viral too, because she did a whole video of what it's like to be working from home. So you know, she did a time lapse, 6 a.m. it's this, 8 a.m. it's this. So she's really helped expand what that's like as well. And I think, you know, I know our time is probably wrapping up, Frank, but we just can't also emphasize enough how like class and obviously race, we've talked about that several times, are impacted by this too. In the sense that, you know, I am talking about having this juggle, but also still am employed, you know, so like, and so there is this kind of love-hate relationship even with capitalism, because, you know, I have a job that I'm so grateful for, and yet it's hard as hell to be raising humans during a pandemic, but also don't really have enough money. Like, part of the reason we're here now is because it costs a shit ton of money to send 3 kids to camp in New York City, you know. Yeah,
so you're with your parents, and
with my parents to help financially, and to, you know, and just to have that generational care. But I think we can't underestimate even the stress and trauma that mothers and parents and caregivers of different class and ethnic places experience, because of the different realities that are real for them, which are very different even from mine.
Yeah, and you know, you're talking about being with your parents, and from my end, you know, I'm going to be 70 next year. One of the reasons Jeannie and I were able to do as much as we have in the area of childcare for our grandchildren is that in the first couple of years, my daughter and son were paying for childcare. I don't mean we made them pay us, but they would help us a little bit. Then, God bless the US government, we started pulling down Social Security and got on Medicare, because as an independent writer, my biggest expense has always been health insurance. It's a killer. Yeah. And, you know, I laugh because people think, because I'm a best-selling author with a couple of my books, and others have dropped like stones into a deep, dark pond. But, you know, there's not much. There was money in the big-time God business before I fled the evangelical world, and a lot of it. But there's not a lot of money in being a writer, even though I've written like 15 books and I have the new one coming out. I mean, there's a living if you schlep around and do speaking and blah, 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 blah. But what I'm saying is, you know, we're doing this childcare for children partly because we now get Social Security and we're on Medicare.
You're able to, and
we're able to. So, you know, let's not pretend that the job career thing in the striving years is something you just do because you're insensitive and not caring.
Exactly.
The problem is the culture is so insensitive and not caring. It doesn't look at us, say, a few minutes before we get Social Security and say, hey, you're doing full-time childcare for 3 children, so 2 young parents can go to work. We value this.
Here's some money.
Here's some money, or, you know, you can deduct something off to anything.
Yep, exactly. I mean, that was the point I was trying to.
No, grandparents taking care of babies, we don't exist.
Yep.
There's no.
There is still a stress that we have to provide financially, because of the way that our culture is set up, that we have to be able to make ends meet. We're not being subsidized because these caring things are not valued. Yeah, so if you go drill for
if I go off the coast here and drill for oil, the US government will put billions of dollars into the venture to help me find it, because that's valued. If I take off work completely and say, I'm going to help raise 3 kids so their parents can be productive citizens, I don't exist.
Yep.
That's it. That's right. That's the whole thing, isn't it?
It's the whole thing, and it's the whole problem, right? It's the whole thing and the whole problem.
Yeah. So let me just turn the page here. When summer's done and you go back to New York, what's the next steps for you all, your family, for your kids, for you? I know the COVID thing still comes and goes and so forth and so on, but so where are you at, Amanda? What's going on with you these days, just personally?
Yeah. So we'll be back in New York in a couple of weeks, knock on wood, and are scrambling to figure out. We still have about 2 weeks where we have to figure out childcare. So if anybody's listening and wants to jump up, we'll take it. But I also am in a place where I'm like, you know what? I also am very used to doing it with them in the home right now, and we'll be fine to do that if we need. My kids have gotten to come with me to a lot of different, I think you've heard, protests and meetings and different activism events, which I think really only helps us all. I mean, I think that's one angle we haven't really talked about yet here, but it was sort of like part of the origins of Raising Imagination, because I was learning so much also from the little humans in my home that they were actually raising my imagination every day about the type of world that we want to have. So
talk a little more about that actual Raising Imagination. What do you do and how can we support that and get involved with that?
Yeah, it's right now it's an online movement building platform where I have conversations that I hope raise a collective consciousness that talk about issues at the intersection of parenting and faith and politics and race that are simultaneously coming from the imagination of the little people that are in my home that are all around us, and also the collective imagination that I want to raise and that I'm part of as society is always changing and evolving. So, and I specifically, you know, I read a book once that talked about how the capacity for people to actually change and to evolve is very, very small in our brains because of how we're wired, unless there's a prior point of connection. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, who am I? Let's like actually just use who I am in the world. I'm white. I'm a Christian. I grew up in the South. I'm a mother. Let's just start there. And I'm going to talk about those things because there are other people who are going to have that place in their brain, connect with me on those things, who then all of a sudden, oh, we're not just talking about wiping butts, even though we are, we're really talking about maybe how we can center and amplify a Black queer community, or how we can center the needs of people who don't look or love or pray like we do. So it's sort of this movement incubator for conversations that matter, honestly. And so it's a non-paid passion project of mine that I hope will be a book one day. I have a children's book idea in my mind, which is called A Big Enough God. I think that's the title. But it'll be talking about how, you know, essentially God's big enough to hold all of this. And no matter what it is, to love the queer person, to love the person who looks different than us, to pray like this, to care for the earth. And really, even though it'll be a children's book, it'll be a book for all of us, because that's kind of how it works. So I'll be doing Raising Imagination on the side. You can follow me on Instagram. That's where my biggest work is, at Raising Imagination, and the executive minister of Middle Church, which we will be continuing our online and starting some in-person worship in the fall. And we will be kicking things off with a homecoming on October 3rd, which if you're in the New York area, come worship with us on the street in front of our burned sanctuary. It'll be beautiful, like a phoenix rising. So the work of Middle Church and Raising Imagination are both close to my heart.
We're going to, Amanda, we're going to have links that we'll put up with our show everywhere and the podcast. No, you know, people don't have to remember what you just said. It's going to be all on everything we put up with Amanda Ashcraft. You will have links to everything she does. And so you can get back in touch. And I would urge anybody who watches this, who relates to what Amanda's been saying, to get in touch with her, either through Middle Church or any of the other links we've given that she's been talking about. And Amanda, listen, I just can't thank you enough for diving into my book a little bit, talking about it today. I really look forward to I hope everything works out for this next rooftop event in New York where you and I can do a panel together. And, you know, if I can ever do anything to help you, what you're doing, you have only to ask.
Okay.
Because I really believe in what you're doing, and I really believe in you know, everything you've been saying today. But even on a personal level, you know, if this is in all seriousness, with the childcare thing, let me know what's going on. Maybe we can help find somebody. Put the word out. I think you're just a terrific person. I really, you know, you open a lot of doors for me when you talk. I just think you're great.
Thanks.
So I am a huge fan. So please count on that. And we will be back with you soon. So thank you, and have a good rest of the summer. Blessings on you and your family. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you for having me, Frank.
It's been a real pleasure. Sorry I talked so much, but you know, you inspire me. So
I do too. Have a good one.
Talk to you. Bye-bye.